I'm swimming, I've been running around. Huh? Next door, Happy Joe.
Hide them off the camera. Hi.
They're talking.
Wait, let the camera have to lean back so I
Okay,
can get
so
on
that's
that.
right. Does it have beans? Because I like your shoes. I only want to.
Can you reach in my backpack and grab my laptop for me?
Busy class today.
My phone.
They saved the seat just for you. They're like, that guy, yeah, put him in front.
Okay, sweet.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank Oh, did you? Here or what?
Does anybody want any more of these
Well,
phone
the-
things?
Oh, just get a nice car.
I did forget your. I don't Elise. Anna. Anna. Back of the phone name. Yeah. Sorry.
Like a parade,
You didn't come to see them, how the hell are you gonna get on?
Yeah, no, I was.
It's nice to be busy, Bob.
It's like a parade. I know, I'm like throwing out things.
What do you get?
Yeah, you know, like the wings go on the back that go like propelling.
Oh, yeah.
Kid, like that, right?
Yeah, I think you hold your, your tongue with your.
You know what that was.
All right.
I'm not anymore because I feel like I'm gonna get too like I don't want
But
to.
it's so easy.
But I recently took, like, I used to have to have my cards in the back of my phone. And I did.
A lot for guys, so that's my.
So I can't.
But now you won't drop it.
It collapses too, so it's easy.
That's what it's like.
Go right in.
I might be in a kickstand because that's not holding.
I was so proud of
That's
it.
still streaming.
The reason I asked was because I dropped my phone on my face.
Well, I have.
You know,
We've all been there, we've all been there.
Thank you. I've never dropped it on my face before.
You haven't been like laying in bed playing on your phone, though, just like hitting you in the face, like.
Yeah. I mean, I may have like fallen asleep and been like, I guess maybe that's what it's.
I've done that, like, you know, like you're laying there in bed facing, you try and like scroll on the other side of the screen, and all of a sudden it just slips. It's very gracefully smashes you in the face, you know.
That hardly counts.
It's not really.
Oh.
You're so- Is that special?
All right, we're right past it. Go ahead.
All right, I think we're getting started.
No.
Okay, boys and girls.
Closing team in front of us?
It is.
It's part of it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. We have our back-end team here to go through the process. Feel free to ask any questions you have as we go or things you've encountered. And we'll try and hit all the important parts for you. So I have Jenny here, who's one of our agent care representatives. She's gonna go through what she does. And then Emily Campos, who's one of our transaction coordinators. And then Megan Churchill is here from the Real Estate Service Center to go through what the Real Estate Service Center does in comparison to what the Concept Service Center does. So I will let Jenny get started.
Oh, yes. That's right. No. Hey, there we go. Okay. Like Jamie said, I am one of the agent care representatives, or ACR. Basically, we are, an ACR is your, I always like to say, like the front end. Like, so your first go-to person or your first point of contact with a listing or a sale. So I'm Jenny Zaffadal. We also have Kim Phillips and Nicole Leach. The three of us are all ACRs, and all of you are divided up amongst the three of us. So I might be yours, or you might see things from Kim or Nicole. Well, and actually, I take that you probably at some point will see something from one of us because we all cover for each other. So don't ever be alarmed if you see one of the other names and I'm going way too fast. So for that, anyway, so I'm going to kind of start at the end and work my way back as far as the process of sales and listings. So I'm going to start with outside sales first. Now, an outside sale is a buyer side sale. So it is where you represent the buyer and the listing agent is with a different company. So for us, on the scheme of things and the priority list, this would be towards the end because we don't do a whole lot to it, just basically getting the paperwork reviewed and into our internal system so we can get paid. Though they are so important and there are things that we do need to process. Now, I was here for a few of the other trainings as far as when you went over listings and sales and purchase, all the paperwork. So we kind of did go over the paperwork, but if you have questions, let me know. Always, for any sale, we always have to have a sales worksheet, purchase agreement, buyer appointed agency, and then the disclosures, so lead-based paint if it's applicable, and the seller disclosure. Always with that sales worksheet must have that to even start the process. So always make sure that you're including the sales worksheet. Now, on an outside sale, I mean, the information isn't as extensive for what we need as it would be on a listing side sale, but please try to keep, complete it as much as you can. And something to note. So on an outside sale, if it's a cash closing and you would like the real estate service center to close that, please make sure that you have that marked on the sales worksheet. And then you're also going to include the buyer settlement services agreement. And then we can actually, if we know that, then we actually move it up priority wise so we can get that going right away. Okay, this is something a little bit new that's been new the last couple months I want to highlight, and this is especially important on outside sales, would be the home warranty. So we did switch home warranty companies to HMS, and most of the time on buyer side sales, you are negotiating that. That's into the offer. So that's the company we use. Now, if you do want to use another company, that's fine, perfectly fine. It's just that your ACR will not order that for you. You'll have to order that yourself or the listing agent. A lot of times, the listing agent will be taking care of that. But you just need to know that. Now, if it is with HMS and we are going to order it, then we must have the HMS warranty application completed and signed in the loop so we can order that. And it's really easy for us. We actually just order it through the loop. We just submit that to HMS and they put the invoice right back in for us. It's pretty easy. Now, if there is no warranty whatsoever, so you have not agreed to it, or it's not part of the offer, then we must have the home warranty waiver. And that is a document you can find in .loop. You can either have them sign that, or you can actually have them sign the application as waived. There's two boxes: acceptance of coverage, waiver of coverage. You can have them do the application and just have them sign off as waiving, or the document that's the actual home warranty waiver document. But one or the other we have to have. So, and then, closing disclosure, which these ladies will get into more when they go over their stuff. But those are the basics for a buyer side sale, outside sale. So, they're pretty simple and pretty, not a lot of goes into it, I guess, on our end of it. But are there any questions? All right, I'm gonna go ahead. So now I'm gonna jump back to kind of the beginning. So listings, these are our top priority for you for your HCR. These are our top priority for you. So just real quick, we have to have the listing agreement, and that has to be signed and completed. Make sure that, and I know this has already kind of been gone over before, but the date it's being listed and expiration date, price, the whole agreement, and that's been gone over, but we do need that and the listing data. Those are the absolute two we have to have, and the seller appointed agency to kind of get things going for you. So, are there any questions on what is required to list on the MLS? I think we've gone over that kind of before. There's specific required fields on the MLS to make it active. A lot of it, sometimes we can auto-populate from the assessor site, but it would be like listing square footage and if there's an HOA, try to think just off the top of my head, directions and everything. Just know that to fill out the data form, fill it out as complete as possible. So we can get all of that accurate for you. And something real quick, what your ACR will do once they put it into the MLS is they will send you a report, a listing email, basically that's kind of your indication that it's on the MLS Live, and we'll attach a copy of the detail report from the MLS for you to look over, make sure that everything's correct. If there's something missing or is inaccurate or not correct, please let us know right away so we can get it changed for you, so it's not going out there with all the wrong information. Okay, so seller appointed agency, and then disclosures. Should I talk about the new construction? With it, we want the seller disclosure, the new construction. Oh, yeah. Okay. With new construction, we still would like the disclosure completed. Now, I understand that sometimes, you're listing it and it's just a lot right now. There's nothing there. But once that gets built and finished, then we still would like to see that completed. Sometimes it does say new construction on it. That's fine. But just know that we're still going to be asking for that. And then lead-based paint, prior to 1978. Mortgage authorization, we are going to ask for that at the listing. I know sometimes the seller doesn't always want to get that filled out right away, but we will ask for that if it's not there, if it's not completed, signed, what have you. So if there is no mortgage, there is a box there just to check saying no mortgage. Let us know that as well. Because if it's not, then I'm still going to ask you for it. And then abstract location, we would like to have that at listing as well. That way, we can kind of get a head start on it, know where it's at. So that process, once there's an offer that comes in, will go pretty quickly. Okay, so something to note, we do have a cutoff time for listings. So if you are submitting a listing between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, we will guarantee to get it onto the MLS that business day. So just know, 4 o'clock is our cutoff. That gives us a little bit of time before the end of business to get that done. We try to still make every effort for you if it's after 4, but just know when we get busy and we are starting to get into the busy season that we give that time just to allow us to get everything done properly, and we're not rushing and all that kind of stuff. So if it's after 4, we can't, if it's after 4, it'll be the next business day. So also another thing your ACR will do is put open houses on the MLS for you. So all you have to do is just email, if it's myself or Kim or Nicole, just pop us an email and say, hey, this has an open house this weekend from 1 4, 1 3, whatever time it is, and we will put it on the MLS for you. I believe then that feeds out to Trulia, Zillow, all those good places. So yes.
Why wouldn't we just go on and do it ourselves?
You can, but we can do it for you too. Just something we do.
Why wouldn't you just tell us? Why don't you go do that yourself?
She's too nice for that.
Yeah, we'll do it for you. So.
Also, I was wondering, why can we update like, if it goes pending, we can personally update that, but I know a lot of other brokerages have not.
Yeah.
Are we not supposed to be able to?
Yeah, I mean, in an emergency situation where a Friday night you get a property pending and you don't want calls all weekend long, feel free to change it. However, make sure you turn in the paperwork.
Yeah.
Because the problem we have otherwise is that that you go ahead and change it pending and then forget to send us the paperwork, and then we've got this whole scramble to try and get it closed on time. So if you're gonna do anything like that, always make sure you submit the paperwork at the same time.
Yeah. And that's just something else too, like with, there's some agents who have, can get in and edit all their own, everything. We like to flow it through the ACR just because we know the rules and we know, that kind of stuff. And it's not that the agent, you guys can do it, it's fine, but we'll take care of it for you. That's what we're here for. So
I talk to other brokerages that are like, this is what pending 4 days ago, and our service center is still not getting it taken care of. And I'm like, why can't you just change it? But they don't have access.
Yeah.
We do,
Yeah.
which is nice in those situations.
Yeah.
When you put things on the MLS, what things do you automatically load in as attachments?
Oh, yes. Seller disclosure, we put as an attachment lead-based paint. If there's anything missing on either of them, so I mean, if it's like there's a missing initial or, it wasn't fully completed or anything, we won't put it on until it's fully complete. But yeah, and then like covenants, HOA covenants, is something we'll automatically put on if it's in the loop. I know sometimes agents will have like, lists of the sellers fill, like upgrade, something they've done to their house, or, they just want, some marketing tools you can put on there as well. So those are really the standard ones. The disclosures for sure, covenants for sure, and then if there's anything else you want on as an attachment, you can just let us know. Put it in the loop, let us know, attach this. So, well, and some agents do a pre-inspection or a pre-radon, and we'll put those on there as well. So, yeah. Okay, and then pictures. So, with pictures, unfortunately, I mean, Dotloop only does PDF, which is great, but most pictures are JPEG. So you'll just email those directly to your ACR. So, either if it comes in a link from the photographer or in a zip file or however, you can share them through Google Drive. Whichever way you do it, you'll just do that directly with your ACR. And then something to note too, I know a lot of agents like to have their listing put on active all as one big package. They don't want it to go active without pictures, or if it's missing something, they might submit it but want to hold off. Just let your ACR know that. Don't, or wait for my go ahead for pictures or this, that, whatever it may be. Just communicate with your ACR about that, and we'll just hold off until you're ready. And then changes to the MLS. So that would be, listing or price changes, or, changes to remarks, anything really that needs updated. You'll just email those to your agent, or, well, with price changes too, you can have the seller fill out the listing change agreement with the change of price, and you'll submit that through Dotloop, and then they'll change it that way. Or, if you have an email from the seller saying, hey, we want to lower this, just forward that to your ACR, and that'll get taken care of for you. And the changes we do too throughout the day. So, I mean, that's going to get, if you send it, that it's going to get that done that day. So we stay on top of those as well. As those are a priority too to get done. So, any questions?
Just have one thing. We have at least some group of agents. Under no circumstance do you ever have an email that contains information about clients. Never send them, like the mortgage authorization, never send that to them and have them email something back to you that has the Social Security. Never ask them on an email for their social security. Never, ever get that proprietary information from sellers and buyers, never in an email. Have them pick up the phone and call you. You know, something like that. We're working on talking about secure email and that kind of thing, which total pain in the butt, and we know that, but the reality is, if it's in your email, it is available to the world. Just know that. If it's in your email, they can get it. It happens all the time. And our business of real estate is being targeted right now. It's being targeted. So be aware of, you know, in your email and online and that kind of thing, be aware, be very cautious of anything out there that's sent to you about opening it, and, you know, any kind of execute file, be careful, stay away from, but never, and warn your people, we will never use email to ask you to do something, or, you know, that like wiring instructions or that kind of thing. We will never use email to ask you for personal information. We just cannot do that. That cover everything? I'm gonna say it's my thing right now. So.
All right. There we go. Go back. Oh my gosh, this is sensitive. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to move on to listing site sales. So listing site sales would be your listing agent, and either another company or another concepts agent is the buyer's agent. But these would be next on priority list because there's lots that goes into them. So again, sales worksheet, must have it. If it's submitted without a sales worksheet, your ACR will tell you, no, you can't do anything. So we got it. So, and for us, the purchase agreement sales worksheets, like, I don't know.
Transaction Bible.
Our Bible. Yeah, basically it's everything that we have to have into our system. So, so the purchase agreement, electronic earnest money option, we do offer that now. We will put a link, and we have been putting a link in the agent remarks on all listings that get entered on the MLS. So your ACR automatically does that for you, puts that link in the agent remarks when they're entering a listing. So it's right there. So again, so sales worksheet, purchase agreement, seller disclosures, home warranty, I went over with outside sales. Now on a listing site sale, this might be different because especially if you're working with an outside company, they might want HSA or, AHS, something like that. So what will happen here is if it's, not HMS and we're not ordering it, we're going to ask you to get a copy of that invoice and give it to us. So you'll see that. So, you'll just have to talk to the buyer's agent and just ask them once they order that to get an invoice, or if you're going to order it, just get us the invoice. Termite inspection, your ACR will order your termite inspection for you. That is through Springer Pest Solutions. And a quick side note, on the sales worksheet, there is a spot for termite instructions. So we need to know, or your ACR needs to know how to order that. So that would be the spot where you need to say, call me, call the owner, give us a number. If you have an assistant, call the assistant. However you want them to schedule it, put it there. Now, if it's left blank, we're going to go off the showing instructions. They cannot use showing time. Springer cannot use showing time. So it's going to default back to them calling you. So if you don't want that, then let us know another way, or if that's how you want it, then that's great too. So, so we'll order the termite inspection, and we'll do that right as we're processing the paperwork and everything. Then once that termite inspection comes back, that report and invoice, we'll send that right directly to you. We'll put a copy in the loop under closing documents, and we'll send one to you. And if it's clear, great. If it does come back with termites, then we'll send you the report, and then Springer always includes a bid with it, so we'll send that as well. Then it's kind of up to you. It's the ball's kind of in your court then, as far as then you're gonna go back to the buyer's agent and possibly negotiate that, or seller's gonna take care of it. However, if you want to use a different company to treat it, that's fine. We just need to know that. We just need to know who's gonna treat it. And then when it does get treated, we need the invoice if it needs to be paid on the closing disclosure, and then also an updated report showing that it was treated. So, and then addendums and amendments, going back to what's needed for paperwork. So if there's a septic, we have to have a septic addendum. And then if there's an HOA, we have to have the HOA addendum. Those are both required. So, and then going back to septic, that is up to the agent to, if there's a septic system, that is up to the agent to get the inspection of that scheduled. We don't, the ACR, the TC doesn't handle ordering septics. So we just need the addendum, and then the TC will need the time of transfer when that's done. So any questions here? Time frame on listing side sales. We're getting busy, and so we will get it pending for you the day you turn it in. But so you might be seeing here is into the spring and summer. It might be the next day that we actually get the wholesale process. So we work through our priority list, and that's, but we'll make sure to get it pending for you that same day, so you're not getting calls or all that good stuff. So something I do want to mention, this has come up. So I know sometimes you do want to leave it active on the market. If it's through an inspection period or whatever, that has to be on the purchase agreement. It has to be agreed to on the purchase agreement, or an addendum stating that it's going to stay active through a certain period of time. Buyer has to know that, because otherwise it has to be put pending. So just know that. You just can't tell your ACR, hey, I want to leave this active for now. No, it has to be agreed upon. So if we don't see that on the purchase agreement, if we don't see that anywhere, it's going to be put pending. So, any questions? Okay, so I kind of went over, so our priorities are listing site sales changes, that sort of thing. We go through anything, if if there was something missing info, missing paperwork, we try to stay on top of that as well. So it's, not clogging up everything. And then outside sales, we try our very, very best to get them done in a timely manner. But when it's busy and we have our other priorities to get done, they will be kind of on the back burner a little bit. Not that we don't want to get them taken care of right, because we do. It's just we want to get your other higher priority stuff done first. So so bear with us a little bit on that. If you have questions, like if you ever are in doubt that I don't know if you got this, or I'm worried about it or whatever, just pop an email to your ACR and they'll let you know what's going on. So when we're going through things and anything's missing info, we put that as internally we put it in our system, but then we will also put a task on the in dot loop for you, in the loop for you. It's at the very bottom. We assign it to you, and then dot loop keeps reminding you every single day, over and over and over.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. And then once it's taken care of, we'll remove it for you. But so anyway, just know that that's at the bottom of your loop. So if you're ever in doubt, like what am I missing, it will be right there. And if for some reason it's still there and like I know I turned that in, just let us know. Sometimes that happens, but you get rid of them when you've taken care of the requirement, I guess.
It could be your indication too that you did it but forgot to submit it for us to look at. So
Yeah. Let's see. Common missing documents. I think we kind of got, there's a few things, I'm trying to think. I'm like on the spot, I'm trying to put this common. Well, there was, we've been working on the agencies with the consent boxes. That's good, all got worked out. That was kind of a, on the lead-based paint, the check boxes, all of them need to be marked whichever they're marking. Sometimes that gets missed, especially on the buyer portion of it. And I don't know if, another agent's missing that or what, but that kind of, and the buyer's agent always has to sign too. That's something. I can't think of anything, else off. Just some, make sure, you're getting the mortgage authorization in and you're letting us know the abstract location and, that sales worksheet's filled out, with, the info that we need. And always submit for review. Yes, I mean, the loop, you might put in the loop and, yep, it's there, but you have to submit for review. Because we don't know otherwise what needs to be looked at or not looked at, or if it's been, because there might be something not submitted, but you submitted that, you just have to submit for review. So we know what, we know it's there and that needs to review and all that. And sometimes it's a little bit of a back and forth, if there's something missing and you get one thing in and, but there's still, something else, we'll still return it and then you'll get it, But anyway, just anytime you want anything, to let us, submit for review. Also, do something handy for the ACRs. Whenever you submit for review, there's a little message box underneath. So the little box pops up asking what folder you want to submit. And there's a little message box. Leave us a message. We'll get it. When you submit it, we get that message. So that's always handy, just to put a message in there, letting us know certain things.
Can I add something about the abstracts? We're kind of fortunate we don't have a ton of companies that do abstracting, so calling around maybe like 3 or 4 of them, sometimes you'll be able to track them down. But if they send it somewhere and they don't have a receipt for it, it's kind of on them, so you force that issue. But it also helps, like if you're dealing with a woman, she might have had the abstract at the beginning under her maiden name, and she gets married and you're searching under her married name and it's not registering with the abstractor. So this just happened to me the other day. They couldn't find it. Then all of a sudden they found it because they found out her last name had changed. So when you're searching for them, we use Bill Boo and Associates, that's, American Abstract, Iowa Title, Peoples. Who am I missing?
Warren County Abstract. I mean, there's the
there's
different county
counties
ones.
out, yeah. So, but there's not a ton of people to call, and they're normally really good at having, like, you'll see the breadcrumbs. Well, Davis Brown had it in 2006, and Davis Brown would say, well, we sent it to the homeowner, and they signed certified mail for it. Okay, now we know the owner had it and signed for it. It's kind of like the trail stops there. So,
And some of these abstract companies do store the abstracts for free. So there might even, if your seller thinks they never had it, they may have told the abstract company, just keep it there and store it for me, so.
but you want to track those down sooner than later, because if we don't find them for some reason, they have to be recreated. It can take a little while, and you don't want that to delay your closing. Or if there's title issues, give Emily or your agent care, your TC, time to help you clear those title issues.
Anyway, so I guess to wrap up, so your ACRs, your front end person will handle, all your listings and all your paperwork, and then through the offer and then it goes to the TC after that. So,
And kind of right in between those, you'll get, from
yeah.
accounting, you'll get a commission report that tells you, based on the paperwork that we've gotten and processed, what they're planning to pay you as far as commission. So do make sure that you take a look at that and make sure that it looks like what you were expecting. We don't want any surprises there. Of course, easier to fix it on the front end if maybe you put 2.5 and it was supposed to be 2.25 or, whatever. A lot easier to fix that up front than it is to fix that later.
Yeah, just want to say, there's two things there that they came up, they're extremely important and they do so much. You know, they take care of so much for you and stuff, but you still have responsibilities. One, when you put a listing in, if you don't check the listing sheet that is sent back to you and something is wrong, that's not their fault. That's your fault, okay? That's your responsibility. They do a good job, they rarely make mistakes, that kind of stuff, but it is your responsibility as the listing agent to check the listing and make sure that it's incorrectly with the correct information, those things, okay? So that's number one, that's your responsibility. Number two, when you get a commission report, it is your responsibility to check the commission report. If it's wrong, it's your responsibility. Fair enough?
And you don't have to, if it's fine, you don't have to reply to the email. If it's not correct, then reply.
Yeah. Yep, and a couple notes quickly on adjusting commission too. If you're adjusting another agent's commission for whatever reason, like, you know, they agreed that it'll be based off of, you know, the price less seller pays, or, you know, it's gonna go down to 2% to help cover something, that has to be signed off on by the other agent, and that cannot be on the purchase agreement or on an addendum to the purchase agreement. That has to be on a professional fee adjustment form, which is in .loop. Those you can just submit for review, you know, we'll get that process. If you're adjusting your own commission, we don't have to be as formal with that. You can let your TC or ACR know via chat, via email, via .loop, whatever. Assuming it's going down.
Yeah.
Assuming it's going down.
Professional fee
If you're,
adjustment does have
It does.
the broker has to sign off on that.
yeah, yep. If you are adjusting your commission up, obviously, then we need the seller to sign saying that they're agreeing to, you know, pay more commission. But if you're adjusting your commission down, you know, at the last minute or whatever, we don't necessarily need a professional fee adjustment just for you to, you know, if you want to lower your own commission, that's totally fine. We're not gonna push back on that.
And referrals, if there's a referral, we need a referral form submitted, and knowing, you know, all that information of who the referral's going to and how, you know, what percentage of the referral is and this and that, so.
If it's in-house, you know, like, you
Yeah,
know, somebody in your office said, look, I'm very, you know, can you take this somebody, give me 10% or 20% or like that, then we don't have to have.
no, we were a
referral
little
form.
lax on that.
That's handled right on the worksheet, the sales worksheet. So don't get all wound up in that and everything. If you're gonna give somebody a little bump because they had a deal and they gave it to you because they couldn't handle it or they're out of town, don't worry about all this other.
Yeah, it's if it's like a company, you know, referral company or
Or not
you
a
know,
state.
or not a state broker or that kind of thing, yeah, that needs to be on a referral form, so. And may, you know, and let us, you know, there is a little spot in the sales worksheet, that says yes or no for referral, make sure that's marked, and we have the referral form, so. And we're all accessible via chat, email, so always use, you know, we're always in there.
If you don't have the Hangouts app downloaded already,
Yes.
make sure to download that, because that's a quick, easy way to chat any of us. It pops right up on our screen and we can get you
They can't avoid you then.
quick, easy answers. It's a handy tool, so I highly recommend downloading.
Unless
it.
it's Jamie can avoid
Wow.
you.
Yeah, that's just you, Lance.
Okay.
She may or may not have you blocked. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I will hand it off to.
So transaction coordinator, so like it says there, we kind of take over once your transaction goes pending. There are 4 of us, so you'll see one of us at some point, whether it be Nikki, Kristen, Sam, or myself. And then another person you'll see right at the beginning of the transaction is Alexa. So Alexa helps us with some of our intro emails. She'll send out little intros to your client as well as to like the lender, the outside brokerage, all that kind of thing, just introducing us, and so that way when we reach out to them during the transaction, they're not like, who the heck is this, you know, another person reaching out to me. So she does all that right up front, and then she also confirms, so wherever you said the abstract is, she's going to confirm that it is in fact there. So if you said it's at, you know, American, she's going to call American and make sure that it's actually there. And then she gets for a lot of what I'm going to talk about here is going to be listing side sale. So on your listing side sale, she will get a pre-abstract order going as soon as she's got that confirmation that it's at the abstractor and that there is a agreed upon offer. So that pre-order gets the abstractor started on it right away before we even have instructions from the buyer's lender. Sometimes that can take a few days for them to get all the loan paperwork they need from the buyer, and then to send the order out. And so we give the abstractor a few days heads up to get started on it. And then once we get those instructions, they just finalize those last few pieces and the abstract goes right out. So that helps kind of get that front end expedited, and so that, you know, your transaction's not being held up by the fact that the buyer needs to turn in documents to their lender. So that's a quick thing that the front sheet does to help speed things up and help avoid any closing delays. As far as title goes, so obviously abstract is the first thing, get that updated, get the invoice in the loop. There is a closing documents folder in any of your sales, and the ACR creates that. You don't have to do that. Anytime we get any invoices, title, any of that kind of thing, we're going to upload that right to your closing documents folder. So let's say for a really fee-sensitive seller, and you're wondering what the abstract cost came in at. As soon as we get that invoice, it's going to be in that closing documents folder in your loop. So you can see those kind of invoices as they come in and do any updates you want to estimates and stuff like that. Once we get title, then we work on clearing it. So some of the common title issues, obviously, mortgage is a real simple one. As long as you filled out your mortgage authorization and had that signed, we're going to go ahead and request the payoff from the seller's lender directly. There are a few lenders out there that don't take e-signatures, becoming fewer and fewer of them each day, but there are a few of them. So every once in a while we might come to you and say, hey, you know, your seller e-signed the mortgage authorization form. Their lender doesn't allow that. Any chance you could have them hand sign. You might see that every once in a while. If we run into it, we'll let you know. It won't be a last minute surprise or anything. We order that straight from their payoff lender. We try and base that on the closing date as far as when we're going to order it. So like if it's closing, let's say April 1st, we're not going to try and wait for their April payment to post to order it. We're going to go ahead and order that in March, you know, usually in the middle of the month sometimes. We generally figure people are at least going to pay their mortgage payment by the 16th because they're going to get a late fee otherwise at that point. Most lenders charge a late fee on the 16th. So we generally make the assumption that they're going to pay, you know, March 16th essentially. So if we can wait until after the 16th to order for an early April closing date, we will. If this is really prevalent this time of year, if your sellers have an escrow account that pays their taxes and they're going, okay, well, wait, my escrow account is going to pay March, but you're trying to, you know, charge us March at closing. That March and September can be kind of a hairy time around those tax payments and escrow accounts. They should know that anytime if they're going to close right around there, they're only going to get either if they have an escrow account and they also have to pay at closing because their escrow account has not actually paid the taxes yet, they're going to get refunded from one of those parties. So they're either going to get refunded by their escrow account if we pay it at closing first, or they're going to get refunded at closing if their escrow account pays it first. That makes sense? Because we're basically racing payments. It's either whether the lender's payment gets there first or the settlement agent's. And so whoever's payment gets there first pays it and the other one gets refunded. So you'll run into a lot of that this time of year and then September because their escrow accounts have been saving up money all year to pay those taxes. But then if we close, you know, a few days before their lender makes the payment, then obviously it's already paid. HOA dues are another common title issue. You'll see those, the way our HOA addendum is worded, and one of the reasons that addendum is really important is that it's worded that your seller will pay for dues through closing. So that'll either be the month of closing if they're monthly dues or through the year if they're annual dues. But then the buyer will prorate back to the seller for any time after closing. So we'll do an HOA proration that'll go on the closing statement and the buyer will pay back the seller for any dues that are time after closing. That makes sense? If it's another company's HOA addendum, if you're not the buyer's agent and it's an outside company, most of them read the same way, that the buyer will prorate back. There are a few of them that don't, so it's a good idea if you're representing the seller, especially if you've got like, you know, a January closing that's annual dues. So before you have that HOA addendum signed, kind of read through it and make sure that it does say they're going to get prorated back, because otherwise that can be kind of expensive for your seller. And usually on those ones that don't say that it'll be prorated, there's an option to prorate. So it's on there, it's a little checkbox. But if you don't check that, then that can be kind of a bummer for your seller if they don't get that proration back. Child support is another one that comes up a lot. Child support does have to be paid current. We're into that issue fairly regularly where, you know, they're in a dispute or something like that, or the ex-spouse just doesn't want to be cooperative and sign. We have got to get an affidavit for closing. We have no real way around that. Either the ex-spouse has to sign it or the title holder has got to go get their certified payment records from child support recovery and pay an attorney to review them and sign it. It's no fun. Nobody likes it. Everybody hates when it comes up. But We gotta do something, unfortunately. Those are a lien against your seller if they've, are paying child support, and so we gotta do that. We, as far as child support and HOA affidavits, we will do our best to be the ones that coordinate having those signed. So we will reach out to the HOA managers and ask them to sign, or we will, if you can give us contact info for the ex-spouses, we'll reach out to them and ask them to sign. Every once in a while, we will have ones that are just absolutely not going to come in for us to notarize them. They're not going an inch out of their way. In that circumstance, it is a great idea for you to have your notary because we will come to you and be like, hey, this person, works downtown. They're not going to drive out to West Des Moines. They won't do it. Can you notarize this document for them? It's very tough if you then are not a notary and we're kind of all stuck. So I highly recommend getting your notary. If not, it's really easy. You just basically fill out a form saying you're not going to lie. It's like $30. You order a stamp. It's easy. Judgments in general. A lot of times judgments will come up on title, especially if you have a seller with a very common name, common last name especially. They may or may not belong to your seller. So if we get judgments that show up on title and your seller's like, I have no idea what those are. I've never heard of this person that's, supposedly suing me. What's going on here? It's entirely possible that those are somebody with a similar name. And so what we do in that case is we have an affidavit of identity that can be done. The seller has to basically find a friend, a coworker, not family, has to be an impartial third party that will sign this affidavit on their behalf saying that they are not the, John Doe in this judgment. They're a different John Doe. We have to have that signed and filed at closing. Obviously, if it is their judgment, then we got to get it paid off, or they can negotiate, a partial release or something like that. We cannot negotiate on their behalf. So if you get somebody that, had a big judgment or something, and wants to try and get them to take, a couple $1,000s to release the property at closing, we can't negotiate that on their behalf. They're welcome to try and negotiate it. That's totally fine, but that's not something we can do for them.
And then what would you need? You'd need something in writing?
We would need something in writing from the judgment, the debtor or the judgment holder, saying that upon receipt of this amount of money, they will do a partial release of our property from the judgment, and then we can close. Yep.
So ultimately, just so everybody knows, the attorney who's doing the title opinion is the one who is basically on the hook for title being cleared for the lender. So they're the ones that usually can give you the best guidance if you're stuck on what you need to get the title cleared. And sometimes they'll work with you a little bit on things. But that's whoever does the title opinion, whether it's Abendroth or Davis or Lasker or whoever does the title, they're the ones that are in charge of.
They get the ultimate say so because it's on them if it doesn't get fixed.
Exactly.
So they're going to make sure that both themselves and the buyer, of course, that's the ultimate goal, are protected against any possible lien.
Typically, the title opinion, if there is a lien below it, it'll say what the attorney is requiring to satisfy the lien.
Yep. Yep. And sometimes like a judgment will show up like a divorce or something like that, where the only requirement is to pay court costs. Okay, that's easy. We can get the the court costs from the clerk of courts and find out what that is. So sometimes if you see those on title, make sure to read those requirements before you freak out too much because it may be just something little. And sometimes it says they need to pay court costs and you call the clerk and the court costs are already paid. They just didn't already show that. So it's some judgments are a bigger deal than others, but we do have to clear each of them as required on the title.
My question would be, is it easier for you guys to get the payoff from these, let's say that it's a small, like waterworks, sewer, right? $75, I got one right now, $75, $68, $32, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it easier for you guys to call and get those liens and reflect them on a settlement statement than it is for these people to go and actually pay them and then prove to you that they've been paid?
Yes, and the reason is, is getting that proof. And if you were to pay it before closing, then we would need the release. The attorney's going to require the release to be filed prior to closing, which sometimes that can take those attorneys or waterworks or whatever a while to do. So it's going to be better to go ahead and just get the invoices and have them paid at closing, because then they treat it kind of like a mortgage, to where they don't expect a release of a mortgage at closing. They expect a payoff, they pay the amount, and then later the bank releases it. So if you're paying a judgment at closing, they treat it just like a mortgage payoff, where they will just accept, here's what they gave us in writing, we have to pay, we pay it, we're done.
And you have a record of it being paid.
Yep.
For, in case you ever bought that, your client ever tries to resell that property and it comes up again, for some reason they didn't provide the release, we have a record that it was paid.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then that does give us some options too down the line. If you ever get a situation where like a judgment shows up on title that's a prior title holder, if we can get a hold of, like Matt was saying, those proofs that those things were paid off, Title Guarantee has some awesome options. for how like prior mortgages can get cleared based on proof of payoff and that kind of thing. So it's important to get all those, the written confirmation of what will pay something off, and then proof that that amount was paid. That's obviously very, very critical, and the settlement agents will keep those records, and of course we keep anything that passed through our office as well. So those can be very, very useful things down the line too, if anything ever comes up, crazy.
So,
I'm sorry.
well, going back to the mortgage, when you're sitting down with your seller and you're going over listing and estimate of proceeds, ask them about the mortgage. Is there only one mortgage on the property? Are there any other junior mortgages? Because for whatever reason, I've run to a few people who believe like this HELOC loan they got
It's not a mortgage.
is not a mortgage. It's just on their name. No, it's attached to your property. It's collateral, is your property. And they will require it to be released and paid in full in order to release that lien. So when the title opinion comes out and they have the mortgage they thought about, that they knew about, and then there's some kind of HELOC loan below that for 15, 18 grand that they were expecting to be in their proceeds, now we have a problem from them moving to their new house.
Or they think, because their line of credit's at a zero balance, that it's fine. That's not the case. They have to actually sign off to close out the account and get a release. So just because it's at a zero balance doesn't mean they don't need to mention it.
So it's important to ask and then explain why you're asking.
And same thing goes with sort of like we were saying with the judgments. It's better, if you find out they have a second mortgage that's zero and stuff like that, still go ahead and put that on the authorization. We will request a payoff like normal, and the bank will either send us a release right then that they're filing, or they'll send us a payoff that says zero, and the sellers just have to sign it, and then that will close it. But we will still have that done at closing, again, because otherwise, if you have them sign that, like let's say they signed that a few days before closing, if the release isn't filed by closing, we're gonna have a problem. So better off to just have us order it like normal, just put on the mortgage authorization, we'll order the payoff, and then we'll have any needed documents signed with the closing documents. And another note on the estimate of proceeds as far as mortgage goes, if people log in and look at their principal balance on their mortgage, or if they look at their last statement or whatever, that is not the same as their payoff. The payoff will include more than that principal balance shows. It's gonna include any release fees, if there's any shortage in their escrow account, as well as it'll have interest from the last payment they made through the date of closing. So when people say, oh, my mortgage is at this balance, throw a little extra money on there on your estimate of proceeds, because the payoff amount is going to be higher than that.
Throw about a month and a half worth of their payment.
Mhm.
So their payment's $800, throw in $1,200 on top of the balance, and you're safe, or pretty close.
Yeah, because otherwise you have some disappointed people that, thought they were gonna have to pay 50,000, then it comes back that it's 51, and, it can be no fun. So I would throw a little extra on there.
And I don't know which one of the four you want to speak to that, but agents get confused sometimes, and certainly sellers and stuff get confused, because we have title opinions, title guarantee, and title insurance. So can one of you speak to that? So it's like, we can talk about that to our people?
Yep, so title opinion is what the attorney does. They look at the abstract and they write up this, book report essentially on what they need to clear for title. It does not have any sort of insurance on it. It is just them writing a report of what needs done. That's done a lot of times on cash. Title commitment is basically Iowa's version of title insurance. They take that opinion and then they put some insurance behind it essentially. You can still have, if you have a cash buyer, they can get a title commitment. They can still do that. They just have to let the settlement agent know that they want that. It's what, like $110? Mm-hmm. To have a title commitment done. It can be a little more if they're an HOA and things like that, but it'll buy a little more, I mean like $125. 15, so nothing crazy. But a title commitment generally is done for a lender, and then the buyer gets a free policy under the lender's policy, or vice versa.
No, you're right.
Yeah. So title insurance is done in pretty much what every other state.
Yeah.
Everybody else doesn't
Just
do it
49
abstracting. Yeah, it's fine. We're not weird or anything. But title guarantee is really Iowa's version of that essentially. It combines kind of the title insurance with the abstracting and sort of the hybrid. But it does provide that formal insurance coverage for your buyer. Lenders, obviously, most of them require it. A few, small credit unions and stuff will do without, but most lenders require it.
Okay, then one other one, what's GAP?
Gap search is basically, so the abstract is updated, and then in the middle of the transaction, that's finished and it gets delivered to an attorney. Well, then from there through closing, there's, at least several weeks probably. So the gap search covers that time between when it was delivered to the attorney and closing. Most time, that depending on abstract, or if you get weird counties, it's different, but most of our main counties here, it's $50 for a gap search. And so you'll see, when you see the abstract invoice in the loop, you'll notice on the settlement statement, it's $50 more, because they have to do that gap search that covers from the time it was delivered to the attorney through closing.
In case anything was put on, there's a judgment.
Exactly. So if your buyer, or if your seller went out and filed a bridge loan, or, a divorce was finalized or something like that, all that type of stuff will show up on there essentially.
And the sellers do sign something at closing that says,
They didn't
in
do
the last
anything.
90 days, they haven't done anything like that, but.
Right.
But they still do.
Yeah.
They still do. Let's see.
They also signed there's no water in the basement.
Yeah.
There's an aquarium.
Which brings up a good point too. If you know your seller is going through a divorce, or if things are changing for them, they are getting a new house, and you hear something about bridge loan or something, bring that up to us. That's very important information. I can't tell you the number of times I've had sellers that we find out a few days before closing got divorced during the transaction. We have to research the abstract immediately, because there may be requirements in that divorce. At the very least, it's going to be that court costs have to be paid. It could be child support stuff comes into play. It could be there's a property settlement in there where one of them has to pay the other one a certain amount. There's a lot that can come up with that. So alert us of that as early as possible.
If they're not speaking to each other,
Please
that's a
tell
good
us
thing
that.
for us to know too.
Because if you have married sellers, we'll send a deed signing email that requests them to come in and sign. Obviously, if we don't know that they're in a huge fight and we send them one email and they all come in together, it can be a little awkward. We're happy to have them come separately and send them separate packages and all that kind of thing.
And if the
So,
divorce is complete, you need a divorce decree, right?
well, we'll have to search the abstract once it's final. Yep, they'll do an updated abstract search and then show all of anything that came from the decree that's required.
Have you seen some fights, have you?
Oh, yeah. We've had some doozies. We've definitely had some doozies. Yes.
Oh, great.
For sure. So we will compile all those invoices, anything to clear title, all that sort of stuff, and then we send it to the settlement agent as seller figures. Your TC will CC you on that. That is a very good time if you have somebody that's especially fee sensitive to update estimate of proceeds or fill them in on what some of the fees came in at. That will have any invoice for the transaction, it'll have the tax proration, it'll have the mortgage payoff, it'll have all that kind of stuff in there. So that's a great thing to kind of peek over. It will also have what commission is, all that stuff will all be in there. It is important to, one of the many things on the sales worksheet, make sure that you're filling in their forwarding address. A lot of settlement agents require that to be on the closing statement. So the last thing we want is for them to be holding the closing statement because they're waiting for your seller's forwarding address. Even if that's like, maybe they don't know where they're moving, but it's their work address, or it's a parent's address, or something like that. Just anywhere they could receive tax documents at the end of the year will be fine. It does not have to be where they end up living. So yeah, if they don't have that where they're moving, that's totally fine. Obviously, this little part over here, we talked about a little bit, important things to tell your TC. Also, give us a heads up if you have a seller that doesn't use email. Usually what we try and do there is have them just come in at one time right before closing to sign everything. So we'll have them, normally we'd reach out early to have your seller sign the deed package, and then later we'll send them the closing disclosure, since it doesn't have to be original or notarized. If you have somebody that doesn't use email, we kind of try and combine those all into one that'll be a little closer to closing, so that way they don't have to come in multiple times. We need to make people make trips, to the office more than they have to. Sellers that are out of state, we can also work with. We will email them documents to print off where they're at, sign, and overnight back. It includes signing instructions, so they have detailed out, sign on this page, notarize on this one, all that kind of thing. And then it will also have a FedEx label at the very end. So they just slap that label on an envelope and it sends it right back to us, and we can track it as it's coming back and all that good stuff. We can send proceeds back to them the same way, overnight FedEx. It's pretty smooth. I've only had a very few random areas where it couldn't get, the very next day. And generally, if that's the case, your seller's probably going to be not too surprised by that because they're in the middle of nowhere. If you do have sellers that are really especially fee sensitive, good to give us a heads up just so that we can, because a lot of times what we do with the settlement statement is we'll email it to them and ask them to just sign it, well, review it obviously, but sign it and send it back. If you have somebody that really wants to go over every single number, we can kind of reword that to just say, hey, you want to come in and go over all this? So that way they get that individual line by line attention that they might like better. you have a title holder that passed away, obviously very important. We will, you know, depending on the circumstances, we will, if we notice that early on, like let's say there's 2 sellers on the assessor site and we have 1 sign all the paperwork, that's going to prompt us to ask some questions, but obviously give us a heads up if you're aware of that. Same goes with if you have a POA being used in the transaction, we need to know that right away. Power of attorneys, if they're going to sign a recordable document, which like the deed would be a recordable document, any sort of affidavits would be recordable, the power of attorney has to also be recorded. So what that means is we have to get the original of the power of attorney with the original ink signatures, all that good stuff, and it has to be in a format that's recordable at closing. So obviously, if you have a POA that wants to be used for closing documents, get that to us as early as possible. We'll have the attorneys involved in the transaction review it and make sure that it's going to work for closing. Get any issues that may arise out of the way early, and then we'll remind them we need the original.
There's different types of power of attorney.
Sure.
There's medical, there's, financial,
Durable.
so that's when someone says they have POA, that doesn't necessarily mean they have the right to sell their home. Okay.
And it has to specifically say on there that they have, they're allowed to sell homestead property. Some I've seen ones before that say that they can sell property, but it doesn't say homestead, and that can be a problem because Iowa has specific homestead rules, and so it has to say on there that they're authorized to do that. And we get issues all the time where POA is really old, they don't know where the original is. There are some things we can try and find some solutions there with reaching out to the attorney who prepared it. Sometimes they either have the original or can do an affidavit certifying that that's a true copy of the original. So if they don't have the original, it's not quite the end all be all, but we need to know who their attorney was that prepared it to try and get them to help us out with the solution.
And it's always a good idea anyway, when you're doing the estate or trust, to note the attorney that it's something done. So we might need to.
If the seller is in the state, we have to have who the estate attorney is, because they're going to have to be the ones that prepare the deed documents and give us any title clearing things for the estate. So we need to know that up front, who the estate
They're
attorney
the ones
is.
that deal with the courts directly to get the court officer's deed as well, so.
Yep. And if it's a trust too, you're going to see us asking for a copy of the trust documents that basically says who's authorized to sign on behalf of the trust. We run into situations where somebody says, oh, I'm a trustee, I can sign for it. And then it turns out that there's actually they have to have 3 trustees sign or something like that. So we have to have those trust documents to say who can and can't sign for a seller. Sort of like an authority document for an LLC or something like that. It says who can sell for this trust or company or whatever. Let's see here.
I think it's kind of. It's those new batteries.
I'm telling you. Okay, so tax expiration. I know you guys went over tax expiration in detail, so I'm not going to go through how a tax expiration works. But
You could always hear that.
it's confusing. It is. But a couple things I did want to highlight just to keep you out of trouble on if you ever get especially new construction property or any ones where abatements changed or big improvements were made to the home. I just wanted to point out a few things to keep an eye out for. So I went with Polk County, and then I did one that'll work for several surrounding counties. So this is an example of a Polk County property that's new construction, and you'll see over here, this is going to be at the very bottom of the page. This is like the top of the page, and this is the bottom. These assessment years here, a lot of times they assess on odd years. You're going to see here these 2 very, very different numbers. So the assessed value went up from a lot tax or a lot value of $550 all the way up to a partial property value of $1,013. What that means is when you're doing your tax proration, you're not going to want to use last year's taxes, because last year's taxes are going to be like $2 probably. This year's taxes are going to be a lot more than $2 because that assessed value has jumped considerably. So that's something you're going to really want to keep an eye out for. Polk County does this handy little thing where they will calculate for you what next year's taxes are going to be. So when you're doing your proration, this is going to tell you what you're going to do this year's taxes based on. So this took that new assessed value, and it took the rollback. So this is how they calculate that. So you see that 1,013, they did the rollback, and then they multiply by the levy rate, and they figure out this is what, based on that 1,013, this is what the annual taxes will be. So when you're doing your proration, you're going to want to use this number, not the $2 or whatever that it was last year. That can really get you if you get one that the assessed value jumped a lot. Another handy thing on Polk County, if you're ever trying to figure out what taxes go with what pay period, is this little section they do down here. So the tax period for these taxes have been accruing July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2018, and they'll be payable September 2018 and March 2019. So that can be really handy if you're trying to figure out, okay, when will these ones be payable? It's gonna be those guys right down there. Other counties, a lot of them use Beacon. So this is a print off of Beacon. Same situation, and you'll see on here that same, theirs goes 2016 assessed value 1270 all the way up to 304 640. Yeah. So again, gonna be a big jump. The other counties don't have the handy little calculator for you. So you have to manually figure that out with the rollback and the levy rates. If you run into one of those and need some help, chat your TC will help you with it. But yes, keep an eye on that when you're doing your estimate of proceeds, especially if you have any reason to believe that the assessed value might have gone up. Keep an eye on that. Most of the purchase agreements are written that the proration will be based on the prior value unless the prior value is not fully assessed. So in situations like this where it has jumped, the tax proration at closing is going to be based on that new amount. If it went up by, the assessed value went up by a couple $100, it's going to be based on that prior year. But some PAs do read that it will always be based on the current. Just depends on the purchase agreement. Questions on that? Comments? No?
Everybody
No,
knows taxes.
I'll leave it alone.
Oh, what?
Seriously? Can you go back one?
Oh, here. There we go.
Okay, so for document signing, I talked about this a little bit already, but basically, unless you would prefer to sign with your sellers, we will be happy to have them come into the service center and we will sign with them, explain all the documents, notarize. If you ever, for your first few especially, if you want to come and sit in with your TC while they do a deed signing, please feel free to do that. We're been on sign with your sellers anyway. If you want to come, hang out with our spiel and stuff, please do. We are happy to kind of talk through the documents, make sure you're really comfortable with them. And that way, if you just decide to do one at some point, you are super comfortable with all the documents. We will then courier the deed package to the settlement agent. We just send that right over to them so that it's there waiting for closing. Quick note on that, if you get a call from the settlement agent on the day of closing and they're like, hey, aren't you coming to closing with the documents? Odds are they're already there. We signed with them. The courier has already delivered them. Settlement agents are notorious for sticking them in their file and then forgetting they have them. So talk to your TC if you get one of those panicked calls. Odds are it's already sitting there waiting. We have that all the time. So don't go into panic mode. It's probably in their folder and they forgot about it. We talked about notary. Let's see here. Any documents that get recorded have to be original. So anytime you're having any sort of affidavit signed, any deed document, all of those have to be original. So if we get, child support affidavit or something like that, we gotta get that original back. Closing disclosures do not have to be original. A lot of lenders do require them to be hand signed versus e-signed, but then they can be scanned and emailed back or faxed back or what have you, uploaded to the loop, any of that kind of thing. If settlement agents will allow them to be e-signed, we'll send them to your seller to e-sign. Obviously, that's usually easier for people, unless you get somebody who just hates technology.
They can change the seller's disclosure all the way up until closing. The buyer's has to be out 72 hours in advance under federal law right now, right?
Certain numbers have to be disclosed early. It does not have to be final 3 days early. It just has to be within, I think it's 0.25% APR, right? That it has to be accurate, but the buyer's numbers can still change right up to closing. Yep.
So the seller, sometimes they've already met with the seller and signed all of the closing documents, but they still have that closing disclosure because it changed. It needs to be signed by the seller.
Yeah, and when we sign the deed package with your sellers, we'll tell them, hey, there's one more document that's going to be coming. It's the closing disclosure. It's the one you're anxiously waiting on. It's got all the numbers, all the financials on it and stuff. We do warn them if we're signing with them that that's going to come, and it'll either need to be printed and signed and then emailed back, or it'll, everything we sign it, we'll send it to you that way. We make sure that that's not a surprise for them coming up. Usually that's the one document they were hoping for anyway, so it's not too surprising that that'll be coming. And then, so closing disclosures, I just pulled a couple examples just so that we can kind of walk through the highlights on those. I have a seller closing disclosure, that's what this is. Buyer closing disclosure will look very similar. Obviously, it'll have buyer numbers on it, and it'll be a little rearranged, but very, very similar setup. When going through it with sellers, I usually start on page 2 because everything that's in page 2, all the charges get totaled up, and then you see that number reappear on page 1. So you kind of have to jump around if you start on page 1. So usually when you're explaining it, start on page 2. And it just goes through the different charges. Like this one has transfer tax. You're going to see that on every settlement statement. It's like sales tax, obviously, on property. Abstracting, commission. We split commission. So anytime we're on the listing side, we're going to instruct the settlement agent to pay each brokerage separately at closing. What that means, why you care, is that the buyer's agent is going to get a check right then and there. Or if you're the buyer's agent, it's another company on the listing side that does split. You get a check right then and there, and you don't have to wait for the listing side's accounting department to cut you a check, all that kind of thing. Try and help get money in agents' pockets as quickly as we can. That's always the goal. And then it'll have any other fees. So like this one has courier, deed prep, home warranty. If you are on the buyer side, if you're representing a buyer, and you get closing disclosures and there was a home warranty in the purchase agreement, I highly, highly, highly recommend checking that closing disclosure to make sure that the seller is paying for that home warranty. There are times where it does not get ordered on the seller's side, and then after closing, your buyer tries to make a home warranty claim, and that listing company never ordered a home warranty. Now you're in a pickle, and you have a seller or a buyer who's, water heater's not working or something, and not a good scramble to be in. So when you get a closing disclosure on your buyer, when you're representing a buyer, look over any of those things that the seller was supposed to pay for and make sure they're on there. You can also forward that to your TC, and we're happy to look it over as well. But always obviously check your commission too, make sure that's right.
Usually everybody checks that part.
That's the good stuff. But yes, look for home warranties too. Keep an eye out for your broker copy that's on there and accurate. We send out a little email at the beginning of the transaction that tells the lender, here's our broker compensation fee, a little invoice for it. So they should have that on there, but always good to double check. Processing fee and courier fee, that one has it lumped. And then, like I said, so you'll see that total there. That's everything on page 2. And then you come back to page 1, and so they've got the purchase price at the top. They're adding in an HOA proration like we talked about earlier. So the buyer's giving the seller a credit for dues that were paid through after closing. And then we take off everything on page 2. We take off the payoff for the mortgage. Seller paid closing costs. Again, that's another thing. Obviously, your buyer's probably going to notice if those are missing on their settlement statement, but another good thing to look at for your buyer too. And then tax proration. And so once they take those things off of top 2 there, they come up with their proceeds amount. So pretty straightforward. These ones look a lot more like the old HUD format, if anybody seen those, remembers those. The settlement statement, or ALTA, looks a little different. This one is more, cut off. It's okay. This one looks, is a little easier to read, I think, for buyers and sellers personally. It's just a debits and credits. So it just flows straight down, debit, credit, simple accounting. So this one, I would just, if you're ever explaining to your seller, just start at the top and just talk through what each line is. You'll notice the seller's fees are down one side, buyer's down the other. This is a 3-page one. But it has the same information that's on that closing disclosure. It's just laid out a little differently. And personally, I find this one a little easier to read. If you do have times where like the seller's credit was, up to $2,500 only including actual closing costs, this is a good way to check that the buyer actually had that much closing costs because you have the buyer's numbers on here as well. And we try to be very aware of that and look for that, especially if you have really high closing costs amount, and it said it was up to that amount. We'll try and keep an eye and make sure they actually had that much cost. Otherwise, your seller shouldn't have to credit as much, basically. Let's see. Maybe.
Need help?
It's touching.
Yeah.
It is.
It just
There
needs to
we
go 2 slides. Checks from closing. So we also will send a courier to pick up your checks from closing unless you are attending closing. Again, that's on listing side. Buyer side, we don't charge your buyer courier fee, so we generally do not send couriers on buyer side. Most of the time on buyer side, there's not a commission check anyway because most listing companies do not split commission like we do. So most times if you're the buyer's agent and if it's an outside brokerage on the listing side, they're going to take the whole check at closing, their company will, and then they'll have their accounting department split it and they'll mail your check to us. Slower.
Snail mail.
Yeah. Yep. But on listing side, we will send the courier to closing unless we know you're attending, and they'll pick up all the checks. And then we will work with your seller to get them proceeds unless you prefer to deliver it. So we will either tell them, hey, we know you look close, your check's ready at our front desk, or if they're out of state, we'll overnight it to them or what have you. Some settlement agents are becoming sticklers about wires, obviously, because of all the fraud. If you have a settlement or a seller that needs a wire for proceeds, we got to talk about that as early as possible because a lot of times now the settlement agents that will wire are requiring original notarized wire form. So obviously if they find out the day before closing they want their proceeds wired, that can be a bit of a struggle. So tell us that as early as possible. Again, we can always overnight checks. So, if the next day is okay, that's probably gonna be a better route to go than wiring, because a lot of settlement agents are really pushing back on wiring just because all the fraud in the industry with that. It's targeted heavily. Let's see here. If your commission check is in accounting by 2 o'clock that day, accounting will get you paid that day. So you get that EFT, and then it'll hit your account, I think that night, isn't it? Like midnight or whatever,
Yeah,
in the morning.
as long as you have all your missing info turned in.
Yes.
If you're missing documents, then we're gonna hold it.
Yep, if you have missing info, when the accountant gets the check, they're gonna email you about it and be like, hey, wanna get you paid, but gotta have this. So, make sure you're getting all that stuff turned in. And again, submit for review, because we don't know it's there to look at unless you submit for review. You also will want to submit if you have any like invoices that you got that you want paid on the closing disclosure. Like let's say, a cleaning invoice or some sort of repair that they agreed to pay at closing. You got to either submit those for review or send those to us somehow so we know to add them. And if you do get like inspection items that you had repaired, you put the invoice in the loop. Note on there somewhere whether that's to be paid on the settlement statement or whether it's been paid. Obviously, some of them come in showing paid via check number, whatever, zero balance. But if it's one that still shows that money's owed, let us know whether you want that paid the seller wants to pay that at closing or if it's being handled elsewhere. So we know whether to put that in those seller figures. What else?
Any questions?
Probably the highlights, yeah. A lot, sorry. Basically, communication is the biggest thing. If you're, if there's anything that comes up with your sellers or anything, you're not sure about, again, chat, email, call, whatever, your TC. We'd rather have you, ask the question and us be like, oh, that's not a big deal, than not bring it up and then have it turn out to be a big deal. So just communicate. That's the most important.
Awesome.
And then from there, our Austin Service Center handles the closing part, the actual settlement statement.
I'm Megan Churchill, so I'm the team lead for the service center. We have Rachel DeVries, she handles cash and contract files. And then Megan Sheevrell, she also does mortgage, so there's two Megans on some emails, it's kind of confusing.
Yeah, the other Megan.
Yeah, the other Megan. She does the signings, the face-to-face stuff, usually, we all can do it, but it's usually her. And then Alexa will also do some front-end emails and stuff for our office.
Notice we have Alexa just do everything.
Yes. Yeah.
If possible.
Alexa, if you have any questions, you can send it to Alexa. She usually gets it where it needs to go to.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So cash and contract closings, $225 fee. And we also work with Ross Burnett at Abendroth and Russell for title work. It's $150. We can work with any attorney that you want to work with. So just let us know. Mark that on the sales worksheet. Mortgage closings, $455 fee. We can close for any lender. So if you work with a loan officer and you want to close at our office, let us know and we can contact them. We can sign at your office, so it can be anywhere, lender's office or at the service center. And then we do REO closings, so HUD, Freddie, all those. Mobile notary signings, so if you have, like if you're a loan officer, the buyer is in somewhere remote Iowa, we can get that scheduled for you guys if that's something that you need. And then FSBO, if you're working with the buyer and the seller doesn't have any representation, we can also represent them. So. How do you hire our office? You have to mark yes on the sales worksheet or fill out that buyer settlement services agreement. And then Alexa will reach out to the loan officer or we'll get started processing if it's a cash order.
If you're working with an out-of-state lender, like Quicken, any of those, I would just suggest marking yes on there. We'll reach out and start hand-holding, because we know Iowa's different and it's really confusing for out-of-state lenders, so try and send it our way and we'll take care of them so that you don't have to mess around with, they're gonna ask you a lot of questions that you're like, what, aren't you supposed to do this?
Then just send it to us, we'll take care of it. Okay, so we get this question a lot, what's the fastest you can turn around a cash closing? It really depends on a lot of different things. The abstract, do you have the abstract? Is it updated? If you need to recreate it, it could take 2 weeks on a rush. It just depends on the time of year. Title work, we need to get that title work done too. So, I mean, it just depends on, like, the seller side will have to order a deed. There's a lot of things that go into it, and we can prepare the settlement statement. We'll coordinate with the listing side to get that prepared. I mean, we can get that out right away, but I mean, if there's title issues, that can all delay closing. So it's really hard for us to tell you an exact time when we can turn it around, but if you give us a date, we will shoot for that. That's the best answer I can give you guys. So if you have any questions, you can just always let me know too. We'll get back to you. Okay, for cash closings, so our office, we set up the settlement statement, we do all that, we work the listing side, make sure title's clear. And then once we have, I'll start at the beginning. So when we know that you've hired us, we send an intro email, and that comes from Alexa, and that gives details on who to contact, who we have for the title attorney, and the closing date. Please read through that. If anything's incorrect, let us know up front. We're trying to work on our communication, and that's beginning what we're reaching out at the beginning to let you guys know what's going on. And then we'll also send you a copy of your title work so you can see if there's any major title issues that need to be cleared. We work with the HUD, we balance the HUD with the seller side, make sure title's clear. And then we also will reach out to you guys to schedule the cash closing. We will not directly reach out to the buyer unless you want us to, we can do that. But some cash closings, we can sign via dot loop, and they can wire in their funds to us, and we can do it all remotely. If any documents need to be notarized to clear title, though, they will have to come in to sign, or you guys can meet with them to sign. And then a mortgage closing. So we work with the loan officers to coordinate your settlement statements and get all that ready. That 3-day waiting rule, they'll send out a loan estimate, but that's not going to be your final. It doesn't have to be the final number. So they just have to have that out 3 business days prior to closing. But that can always change up to the day of closing. So like when we were talking about sending out the seller CD and stuff, all those numbers can still change. And if the loan estimate is not signed 3 days prior, they will have to push out the closing. And then scheduling a closing time, that's usually handled by the loan officer. If they're out of state, we will reach out to you guys to get it scheduled at our office, wherever you want to sign at. And then our signing hours are usually 8:30 to 4:30, but if a buyer cannot make that work, we will work with you guys to get it scheduled. So just know that we're flexible. Okay, funds for closing. So we take a cashier's check. That's what we prefer. We can do money orders as well, and personal checks below 500. I mean, we don't prefer personal checks. We like the cashier's checks. Wire fraud, we will always call. If your buyers are going to wire in funds to us, I recommend their bank calls us and just confirms, because there's so much fraud that's happening. And if we're wiring the seller proceeds, we require that notarized form. And then, so I want to bring up this example that we had a fraud attempt for proceeds, and they hacked into an Ira Realty, their email, and they told them that we don't want the proceeds in a check anymore, we want it wired. So they said, also, my cell phone doesn't work, so please call this number. And it was kind of crazy what they did. And so Rachel, it was a cash closing, and she goes, well, we can't take instructions over email. And so he goes, okay, I'll fax you. So he faxed her a form, and it was Iowa Realty, everything all over it. Like Iowa Realty, their fax number, everything. And so we ended up calling, we called the agent to confirm, and he said, no, that's not me. I mean, it was, the detail in it was crazy, wasn't it?
They copied the exact email.
Yeah, what was there was one little thing on the Iowa Realty email.
They had an extra I in there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
The little
But if
I.
you didn't look, you
And so
wouldn't.
you had to look really close because it was two small eyes next to each other instead of one.
I've
That
seen
was
ones
the
before where it's
only-
exact too.
That was
Like,
the
Yeah,
I don't know
only
how they
into
did
your
that one,
email.
but I've seen it before where it's exact.
But it was amazing and
Try to stay
kudos
away
to-
from wires.
Kudos.
Yes.
They found it, they stopped it and saved a lot of people, a lot of heartache and hassle. So.
The best thing to do is to have this conversation on the front end, so you're not scrambling at closing trying to figure it out. Okay?
A lot of settlement agents will accept, like, if you have a seller that, let's say, is selling at like 10 o'clock and then they're buying at 11 o'clock, a lot of settlement agents will let them just sign over the proceeds check. So they'll get their proceeds from their sale, they'll do pay to the order of the new settlement agent, and they just sign it over, and it's that seamless. Even buyers, We think of them as instant, but even those sometimes take time, especially if you get one that gets the random audit by the Fed. It could be days before that wire actually hits their account. So some people have the preconceived notion that wires are going to be faster. That is not a guarantee by any means. Most
That's not
times,
instant.
no.
It's not instant.
I have a cash closing Friday that you're doing a wire transfer for. Why are you doing a wire transfer then?
For wiring, buyer's money wiring in or
Yeah.
seller's money wiring
No,
out?
it'd be buyer's money.
Buyer's money wiring in is a little more common,
Yes,
just because they can call and verify all that directly.
Yeah. I would still have the buyer's bank call us to just verify our numbers.
Okay, well, I'm just, yeah, you're just talking about buyers that are easy one Friday. I was wondering why.
Okay, so coordinating keys, we won't coordinate keys for closings, so that is something that needs to be done between you guys, the agents. Spouse needs to be present to sign the mortgage. So if there's one person on the note, they both have to be there to sign that mortgage. Just wanted to go over that. Do you have any questions on closings? I mean, we usually send out the Alta form, which Emily went over. We don't send out the buyer's CD because that has personal information on there, and the lender will go over that with the borrower.
We're always happy. Sometimes cash throws people off because there's no lender involved, so you're a lot more involved with the buyer and the whole closing. We're happy to help through that, guide the buyer, guide you, whatever. Usually cash are so easy, they're hard. So.
And then one more thing that our office is trying to do. We just been putting up these slides, so it's on their screens when they come in, and it doesn't seem like anything big, but buyers do appreciate that. So that's on when they walk in and see that. And then we've been making these little binders instead of giving people folders for their closing docs. So when they go to see information about their house, like your picture is right up front and their loan officer. And then, yeah, I think it's a lot easier for people to keep. I mean, you can just shove it. It's just, paper size, it's not legal, and yeah.
And then hopefully you're always at the forefront.
Right, like right there. So, we just have details in there too, put up front. Like you're a new homeowner, get your keys changed, all that kind of details for them. And then, abstract location, right up front for them. And then information on homestead credit too. We put that in there. And then their home warranty invoices in there too, so they have that right up front for them. So if you want us to talk to any of your loan officers that you work with, let us know, because we'd be happy to.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is.
This gives you a little bit of an idea of what's behind the scenes and just how much is done and handled, taken care of for you. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I will match this group up against anybody in the nation. I've talked to them. This group is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Let us know if you have any questions.
I'm dealing with Jennifer Lindemann. She said somebody.
Just a quick plug for upcoming training and
Sam,
coaching on
Sam
work.
forgot.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna start.
Okay, like somebody should, oh, hey, you guys are handling the closing, okay, my
Monday,
daughter's involved with that. I just
That
want to
will
share.
be.
So it's not you guys, like-
No, Sam is one of our
Every other
transaction
Monday.
coordinators, so she does what I do, but for
It's just
different.
basically
Okay,
going
okay,
through
gotcha.
building your business from scratch.
Small
So
world sometimes.
I've already taken from building your
Real estate
database,
definitely.
how to market to that database, to your social media marketing plan, all of that kind of stuff. It's we hold you accountable in the class, so it's accountable to come the next 2 weeks later and have action items done. So we'll send out more information on that, but Monday, April 2nd, on that will start.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, Becca, can I see yours for a second?
No, you think behind you real quick. Oh, you're fine. Just gonna grab my,
Yeah,
get back here before I forget it. Although it has my keys in it, so I wouldn't get very far.
Oh.
Yeah, I just attach myself all day long. Non-professional friendly tone.
Thanks, ladies.
You let me know they were all done.
Okay, so nothing